No one in the courtroom expected what happened next. The man who stepped forward carried himself with the uneasy confidence of someone used to being recognized, yet terrified that this time, recognition might not save him. A strange, electric tension filled the room, the kind that makes even the wooden benches seem to hold their breath. It was early morning, the light spilling through the courthouse windows in long, quiet bands. And still, something about this case felt heavier than the others that day. Judge Frank Caprio sensed it instantly. Before the defendant even spoke, before the charge was read aloud, he felt a ripple of unease, as if the air itself was waiting for a revelation. The clerk called the case. State of Rhode Island versus Elias Vargas. A soft whisper ran through the gallery. A name that many in the city recognized, not because Elias was famous, but because of who he was related to. The older brother of Councilman Adrian Vargas, one of the most publicly admired and politically powerful figures in the community. A man whose face decorated billboards during election season. A man who preached fairness, reform, and community trust. And here was Elias, standing alone, eyes dim, shoulders caved in, as if the shadow of his brother's reputation weighed on him like a chain. The charge was simple. Failure to stop at a red light, reckless driving, and ignoring an officer's signal. But the energy in the room insisted this case was anything but simple. The prosecutor read the summary without emotion, but the words hung heavily between everyone present. Defendant insisted he did not need to provide identification, claimed the officer knew who he was, and stated he expected a warning, not a citation. Judge Caprio watched Elias silently. The judge had heard arrogance before. He had seen offenders who weaponized connections, money, or influence. But this man didn't look arrogant now. He looked hollow, afraid, and something else, something harder to place. A guilt that seemed older than the traffic stop. "Mr. Vargas," Judge Caprio said softly, folding his hands, "please step forward." Elias approached. He didn't lift his gaze. The courtroom waited. Judge Caprio had seen thousands of defendants, and almost always he could read them within seconds. The proud, the ashamed, the broken, the fighters, the liars. But Elias was different. He was a locked door with a trembling frame. Before speaking again, Caprio took a breath, the kind he used when he sensed a person was bracing for more than judgment. "Let's start from the beginning," he said gently. "Please tell me what happened that morning." Elias swallowed hard. His voice cracked on the first word. "Your Honor, I made a mistake, but it wasn't what it looked like." There was a throb of silence. The judge studied him, his trembling hands, the faint bruising beneath his eyes, the unshaven jaw that hinted at sleepless nights. Something was very wrong behind this traffic violation, something deeper than entitlement or misconduct. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. Even he seemed uncertain now. Judge Caprio leaned back, his tone thoughtful. "Mr. Vargas, I see many things in this courtroom. I've learned that a simple charge is often the surface of a much larger story, so before I make any judgment, I need to understand yours." Those words broke something in Elias. His shoulders shook, just slightly. He took another breath, but it came out uneven. The courtroom grew impossibly quiet. "I didn't ask for special treatment," Elias said in a hoarse whisper. I just couldn't go through that again." Caprio frowned. "Go through what again?" Elias pressed his lips together, as if the truth were a stone he had carried too long. He lifted his gaze for the first time, and his eyes were red, tortured, older than his face. "My brother," he said, "was supposed to pick me up that morning, but he didn't. He was meeting with the mayor, and he forgot. He always forgets." A murmur traveled through the gallery. People exchanged looks. The connection to the well-known councilman suddenly felt sharper, more complicated. Judge Caprio raised a calming hand. "Please continue." Elias looked down. I was rushing because I'd just gotten a call from the rehab center. My daughter, she had checked herself out at 3 a.m. They couldn't stop her. She's 18 now. They said she left crying, talking about finding me. His voice wavered. I thought she might be walking somewhere, alone, in the cold. I panicked. The twist settled like a physical blow across the room. Even the prosecutor's expression softened. Judge Caprio's brow lowered, his heart pressing against his ribs. The words replayed in his mind with a gravity that dug deeper each time. My daughter. Left rehab. Searching for me. Elias continued, wiping the corner of one eye. When the officer stopped me, I didn't have my wallet. I left in a hurry. I wasn't thinking clearly. And when he asked for identification and I didn't have any, he assumed I was lying. I tried to explain, but he didn't believe me. And I just broke. I told him he knew who I was because I thought... He paused, shame spreading across his face. I thought maybe my brother's name would calm things down long enough for me to keep looking for her. Not to get out of anything, just to keep moving. His breathing was shallow now. I shouldn't have said it, I know that. But I was scared. I was desperate. And I was alone. Judge Caprio felt the ache of it settle in his chest. He thought of his own children, his own grandchildren. He thought of the helplessness of a parent searching for a troubled child in the dark. A long silence followed. Heavy. Human. Elias's voice softened. People think being related to someone powerful makes life easier. It doesn't. Not for me. Not for my daughter. It just means people assume things about us. My brother is loved, respected. But me, I'm the family's problem. A faint gasp came from someone in the gallery. Caprio didn't look over. His eyes stayed on Elias. Mr. Vargas, he said quietly, what happened to your daughter afterwards? That question, simple, honest, needed, hit Elias like a wave. His voice was barely audible as he answered, They found her 2 hours later, sitting on a curb near our old apartment. She was crying, and she kept saying she wanted to be better but didn't know how. Tears rolled down his cheeks now, but he didn't wipe them away. I failed her, Your Honor, not the officer, not the court. Me. And there it was, the truth buried beneath the morning's charge. A broken father, a desperate mistake, a man suffocating under the public shadow of his own sibling. Judge Caprio breathed slowly, feeling every word, every fracture in the man standing before him. Inside the judge's chest, a memory stirred, of another parent, another courtroom, another moment when the law had collided with the raw needs of a human heart. He let the memory sit unspoken, guiding him quietly. He folded his hands again, but now his voice carried a deeper gravity. Mr. Vargas, the law requires clarity, but justice requires understanding. I need to see both before I move forward. The courtroom leaned in, hanging on every syllable, and as Elias lifted his eyes, the rising tension promised a truth yet to come. Something no one had expected. Something that would turn the room silent once more. The courtroom felt suspended, as if held in place by the weight of Elias's story. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly, folding his hands in that familiar, thoughtful way he often did when balancing the delicate line between law and humanity. His eyes softened, though his expression remained composed, quietly absorbing every detail. Mr. Vargas, he said gently, your explanation gives context, but it doesn't yet explain something important. He paused, letting silence sharpen the moment. When the officer asked you repeatedly why you refused identification, you said something specific, something that made him call for backup. Elias froze. The prosecutor opened the incident report, clearing his throat. According to the officer, the defendant stated, and I quote, I don't need to go through this again. Caprio nodded. That line stood out to me as well. Again. What happened before, Mr. Vargas? A tremor passed through Elias's shoulders. His hand gripped the edge of the podium as if the truth might knock him off his feet. He looked down, took a breath, and when he finally spoke, his voice seemed scraped raw. Your Honor, 5 months ago, I was pulled over under almost the same circumstances. I was driving late at night, also searching for my daughter. She had relapsed then, too. His fingers curled tightly. But that time, things went very differently. The courtroom leaned closer, instinctively sensing the gravity of what was coming. Elias swallowed, the effort visible. I tried to tell the officer I was looking for her, but he wouldn't listen. He thought I was drunk. He ordered me out of the car. I complied, but His voice cracked completely. I begged him to just listen, to let me explain, and he took that as resisting. A soft inhale rippled across the gallery. Judge Caprio's eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but with a quiet, concerned focus. I was handcuffed on the ground, Elias continued, while my phone was ringing in my pocket. It was the rehab center. I couldn't answer. No one could hear me. And when they finally did get through hours later, she had already disappeared. His voice dropped to a whisper. They found her the next morning, sleeping behind a laundromat. The silence in the room thickened. Even people who had come for routine tickets now watched with somber eyes, their earlier impatience replaced by empathy. My brother hired an attorney, Elias said, and the charges were dropped. The whole thing was sealed because he didn't want it hurting his campaign. So, yes, Your Honor, when I got pulled over again and the officer raised his voice, and I thought he didn't believe me, and I thought I was about to lose precious time again. He shook his head, a visible shiver coursing through him. I panicked. I wasn't trying to get special treatment. I was trying to prevent another nightmare. Judge Caprio let the moment breathe. His voice, when it came, was slow and deeply human. Trauma, he said softly, has a way of repeating itself, even when circumstances are different. Elias didn't speak. He simply nodded, grateful that someone finally understood. But the courtroom was not through with its revelations. The prosecutor, usually stoic, closed the folder and stepped forward hesitantly. Your Honor, permission to speak briefly? Caprio nodded. The prosecutor shifted his weight. I want to acknowledge that the officer involved had no idea about the defendant's prior incident. From the officer's perspective, Mr. Vargas's refusal to provide identification looked like entitlement. But given this new context, he exhaled, voice softening. It appears it may have been fear. That single word, fear, hung in the air like a lantern illuminating a darkened hallway. Judge Caprio took a measured breath. His voice lowered, dipping into a reflective cadence that hinted at the wisdom earned over decades of watching lives unfold in front of him. Mr. Vargas, he said, sometimes people in pain try to shield themselves with the wrong words. You invoked your brother's name in desperation, not manipulation. But the perception it created was powerful. Elias's gaze dropped again, this time in shame, not fear. Caprio continued gently. I'd like to know one more thing. You said your brother often forgets you. Tell me why you two are distant. That question struck a nerve so deep that Elias's reaction came out before he could contain it. A sharp inhale, a stiffened spine, a blink that fought back mourning. My brother. Elias paused, gripping the podium. His throat worked before any sound emerged. Adrian was always the golden one. Straight A's, scholarships, city honors. You know the type. My parents used to say he was destined. Me? A faint, broken smile pulled at one corner of his mouth. I struggled. School, jobs, relationships, all of it. My daughter's mother left when she was little because I couldn't provide stability. Adrian tried to help, but only in the ways that looked good on paper. Judge Caprio listened without a flicker of judgment. Whenever I messed up, Elias said, he distanced himself to protect his image. He'd say things like, "I can't have another headline tied to you," or "just stay out of trouble until after the election." And his voice thinned. I internalized it. I believed it. I believed I was the brother who only existed as a liability. A quiet ache unfolded through the room, one that countless people recognized. The pain of being the less favored child, the overlooked sibling, the family member always expected to fix themselves alone. Elias continued. So, when I mentioned his name to the officer that morning, it wasn't me thinking I deserved anything. It was me thinking, maybe this time, his name might actually help me, instead of haunt me. A woman in the audience dabbed at her eyes. Judge Caprio felt something shift in him, a mixture of empathy and righteous resolve. His internal voice rose, quiet but firm. The law cannot change a man's past, but compassion can help shape his future. He leaned forward, elbows on the bench, speaking in a tone that felt almost fatherly. "Mr. Vargas, you've carried loneliness for a long time, longer than this courtroom has known you." His eyes softened. "But I need to know one final truth before I decide this case." Elias raised his head. "When you were driving that morning," Judge Caprio said, "were you thinking clearly enough to know the risks you were taking on the road?" The question was fair, grounded in the law, rooted in responsibility. The courtroom waited. Elias nodded slowly. "I wasn't thinking clearly, Your Honor. I was terrified, but I wasn't reckless on purpose. I was scared of losing my daughter again. I should have handled it differently. I know that, and I'm not asking to be excused for it. I just want to be understood." His voice cracked once more, but this time there was strength behind the break, honesty instead of defensiveness. Judge Caprio sat silently for a moment, letting his breath settle. His eyes drifted briefly to a spot on the bench, a place where countless stories had washed over him across the decades. He remembered other parents, other children, other moments when life's brutal unpredictability collided with the justice system. This man isn't asking for favor, he thought. He's asking for dignity. And that distinction made all the difference. He looked back down at the defendant. "Mr. Vargas, before I render judgment, I want to understand what your relationship with your daughter is like now. Is she safe? Is she receiving help?" Elias's expression softened into something almost fragile. "She's living with me again. We're going to counseling twice a week. She's trying, Your Honor, and for the first time in a long time. I think she believes I'm trying too." A quiet warmth flickered across the courtroom. Then, unexpectedly, the gallery doors opened. A young woman stepped inside, thin, pale, hands trembling, a hoodie too big for her frame, eyes red from crying. The room turned. Elias gasped. It was her, his daughter. Elias's breath caught in his chest as the young woman stepped hesitantly into the courtroom. She looked fragile, almost spectral, as if life had not yet decided whether to hold on to her or let her drift away. Her eyes darted across the room, fearful, searching, until they landed on her father. "Leah," Elias whispered, barely audible. The young woman wrapped her arms around herself as though trying to keep her ribs from collapsing inward. A bailiff approached, but Judge Caprio raised a gentle hand. "It's all right," he said softly. "Let her come forward." Leah walked slowly toward the defense podium. Each step seemed to tremble with the weight of 1,000 unspoken memories. Cold nights, desperate arguments, broken promises, and moments of fragile hope stitched between them. She reached her father and stopped, her breath quivering. The courtroom was completely, achingly silent. When she finally spoke, her voice was thin but steady. "I'm sorry, Dad." Those 3 words fractured something inside Elias. Tears gathered instantly in his eyes. But he didn't reach for her. Not yet. He looked as though he feared even a gesture might shatter the moment. Leah turned toward Judge Caprio, her shoulders trembling. "Your Honor." He wasn't lying. He really was looking for me. I left rehab because I got scared. I thought he didn't want me anymore. A soft gasp swept the gallery. Elias's knees buckled and he steadied himself on the podium. "Leah, no, sweetheart. I was terrified. I was looking everywhere." "I know," she whispered, wiping her eyes. "I know now." Judge Caprio observed the scene with a heart both heavy and hopeful. He had witnessed countless reunions, some born of justice, others of tragedy. But this one felt raw, unfinished, painfully real. Two souls orbiting each other, both convinced they had failed. The judge leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle. "Leah, would you mind telling the court why you came today?" She hesitated, fingers twisting around the frayed strings of her hoodie. "I heard what happened. I heard he got stopped again. I thought maybe he was in trouble because of me." Her voice cracked. "He's been trying so hard. He wakes up early to make breakfast even when he hardly sleeps. He goes to meetings with me. He doesn't yell anymore. He doesn't give up on me. He tries." Tears streamed freely down her cheeks now. "And I don't want anyone thinking he's some entitled, whatever they called him." She shook her head. "He's just a dad who's scared of losing me." Elias covered his face with one trembling hand. The gallery sniffled. Even those who arrived for parking violations sat with softened expressions, caught in the quiet gravity of a father and daughter fighting their way back to each other. Judge Caprio breathed slowly, absorbing Leah's words. He let them settle in his chest, warm and heavy. When he spoke, his tone carried a tenderness that only decades of understanding human frailty could forge. "Leah," he said, "your courage in coming here. It means more than you may realize. Not just to your father, but to this court." She nodded timidly and stepped back beside him, her arm brushing his. Elias exhaled shakily, as though that small touch had restored something vital inside him. Judge Caprio turned his attention back to Elias. "Mr. Vargas, before I give my ruling, I want to ask you something very important." His voice lowered, gentle but resolute. "What do you want most right now? Not from the court, but from life." Elias looked at his daughter. His expression softened into something fragile, reverent. "I want to be the father she needed all along, and I want her to believe that she deserves a life better than what she's lived so far." Leah pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling through her fingers. The judge nodded, slowly, deeply. He took a long breath, allowing the weight of the moment to settle in the room. When he finally spoke, his words carried the gravity of compassion forged by wisdom. "Let me tell you both something," Judge Caprio began. "There's no such thing as a perfect parent. Not in this courtroom, not anywhere in the world." His eyes softened. "But there is such a thing as a parent who refuses to quit. A parent who keeps showing up, again and again, even when life has given them every reason to walk away. And from what I've heard today, Mr. Vargas," he paused, "you are that parent." Elias bowed his head, shoulders shaking. Caprio continued, his tone shifting to a more judicial cadence. "Now, regarding the matter of the traffic violations, the law must be respected. Chaos on the roads helps no one, especially those already balancing fragile circumstances." Elias nodded, accepting, bracing himself. "But justice," Caprio added softly, "is not merely the mechanical application of rules. Justice is the pursuit of fairness in context." He lifted the citation. "Given the extraordinary emotional distress, the urgency of the situation, and the authenticity of your explanation, I find that your actions, while improper, were not malicious." A hush fell over the court. Therefore, the judge said, I am dismissing all fines. A collective breath escaped the gallery like a quiet wind. Elias stared up, stunned. Your Honor, I don't know what to say. Judge Caprio smiled gently. Then let me say something for you. He leaned forward, his gaze shifting between father and daughter. You both have been through storms that would break many families. But storms do not decide who we become. What matters is whether we keep reaching for each other through the wind. Leah wiped her tears on her sleeve. Caprio continued, voice filled with warmth. Take this moment not as a free pass, but as a second chance. They're rare, and they're precious. Invest in each other. Build something new, something steady, something that lasts. Elias nodded vigorously, emotion pouring from him. I will, Your Honor. I promise. Leah whispered, We both will. Judge Caprio gave them a gentle nod. I believe you. Then, as he often did when a case touched something deep within him, he offered a reflection, not as a judge, but as a human being. In life, he said, we all stumble, sometimes a little, sometimes so hard we fall to our knees. But the measure of a person, of a family, of a parent, is not whether they fall, it's whether they rise together. The courtroom was silent, reverent. Case dismissed, Judge Caprio said softly. Elias let out a shaky breath and turned to his daughter. She stepped into his arms, and he held her with the kind of tenderness only a desperate father understands. A man who had feared, truly feared, losing the only person who tethered him to hope. People in the gallery wiped their eyes. Even the prosecutor cleared his throat and looked away. As father and daughter embraced, Judge Caprio watched with quiet satisfaction. His heart softened around the sight, warmed by the reminder that justice, true justice, wasn't a matter of punishment, but of restoration. Leah whispered something into her father's ear. Elias nodded, pulling her closer. They walked out of the courtroom together, slowly, steadily, side by side. Judge Caprio watched them disappear through the doors, a faint smile touching the corners of his lips. Sometimes, he thought, the law repairs roads. But today it repaired people. And with that, the courtroom breathed again. Another case ended. Another story etched quietly into the walls of a place where humanity and justice meet.